How to fill the deep emptiness in your life by turning your soccer dad minivan into a low-profile vehicle operations platform. Coming up. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things that entail needing to carry a weapon in your Kia Windstar. Is that a car? That's a car, right? If you followed any of our social pages for any length of time, chances are you have probably seen us take pot shots at the concept of the gun guy truck, as there's really nothing positive that can come from plastering the rear windshield of your everyday driver with the 3-foot by 3-foot Glock logo. That being said, however, there are a number of solutions for organizing kit and emergency medical supplies in your vehicle that don't require you to be a super secret squirrel type to make use of. Just so that we are super upfront and clear about this, we are not the type of folks that are qualified to talk about emergency medical aid or trauma care, anything like that. Plenty of folks out there that are, not us. However, if you're the type of person that is carrying on the daily, to some extent, it probably is your responsibility to be able to deal with the really nasty kind of wounds that gunshots can inflict on the human body. Even if all that entails is stabilizing a person who is in some sort of critical condition and making sure that they have enough time to actually be seen by somebody more qualified than yourself. And also, even though gunshot wounds can be horrific, we're probably all desensitized to the brutal damage that vehicles can induce on our fragile, squishy meat bags, just due to the fact that they're a part of everyday life for the vast majority of us. And having some real general first aid or boo-boo type stuff in your car certainly isn't a bad idea. And to that extent, we've got 2 platforms for you today that will help you accomplish just that, and potentially even more if you are so inclined. First up is probably the more casual and accessible everyman solution for car gear, 511's Vehicle-Ready Hex Grid seat. I've covered 511's Hex Grid system a few years ago after first getting to play with it at a distant previous SHOT Show. And while the system itself seems to have kind of been ditched as a total overhaul or replacement for standard MOLLE configurations, in my opinion, the Hex Grid system's ability to mount pouches at a variety of non-standard angles really shines when applied to the confines of the inside of a vehicle. Obviously, this is going to be totally up to personal preference, but if you've got the system set up on the backside of your passenger seat, being able to angle your pouches containing stuff you might need or want to access quickly is a huge help, especially if you're trying to grab it in some kind of shitty scenario where your adrenaline is spiking or whatever. Installation of the system is reasonably simple and consists of an adjustable loop that'll fit around your headrest, 2 lateral cinches that fit around the body of the seat itself, and additional vertical straps that protrude from the bottom of the grid that run underneath the seat, though I didn't find these super necessary personally. Identical to the grid system found on the back of 511's AMP bags, the Vehicle Grid also features external loop Velcro that makes it compatible with a lot of other Velcro interfacing products and pouches on the market. And as I've said before, I'm a big fan of manufacturers who don't force you to buy proprietary stuff to make the most out of their platforms. The Vehicle Grid also works great with 511's modular gear set panels, and depending on what you're doing, they provide a great way to keep your bullshit organized and readily accessible, from mags to general bits and bobs to medical supplies, you name it. In this case, I've got a 9x9 utility gear setup for real general storage, and I enjoy the fact that its internal rigidity means that the pouch holds its shape well enough even when loaded down, which allows me to grab the entire panel and go, if for whatever reason I needed to do that, choosing to forego the J-hooks and rely entirely on the Velcro attachment system. It's also one of the largest and most varied gear set pieces that 511 produces, and there's ample room for way more stuff than I would ever really need to personally carry for any reason, but just for example, you can fit the entire contents of a Surviveware IFAK, 3 rifle mags, 4 pistol mags, a shit ton of tools and knives, you get the idea. It's probably also worth mentioning that most current 511 pouches come with these adapters specifically so that the MOLLE tabs can be retrofitted and slapped right onto the Velcro itself. Again, depending on what your specific needs are, that might be kinda superfluous, but as you might imagine, if you've got this stuff mounted inside your Kia Rondo, it's definitely a car, and you need to grab medical stuff in the event of an emergency, the last thing you want is to be anchored to your vehicle with an immobile platform while doing so. coming in right around $45 or so just for the Hex Grid vehicle platform thing itself. It's also reasonably affordable if you are trying to scrape together some kind of car setup on a budget. And now for the downsides, and there's not a whole lot, but there are a few. Personally, I would have loved to see some sort of extra rigidity sewn into the backing material of the Hex Grid panel itself, as it's essentially just a scaled-up version of the same panel that you would find on 511's backpacks. And while that's generally pretty okay, as you can see, it is a little bit floppy. That's really not going to be a huge issue once you actually get it secured to the vehicle or the seat, wherever you're putting it. But in the process of doing so, you're probably going to have to really crank these straps down, and doing that on your own is certainly not impossible, but it is just a tiny bit annoying. Secondly, and admittedly this is a tiny bit nitpicky, but this thing is not very low profile. So if you're throwing this in your car and, for instance, I live in a pretty big city, and the possibility of random people looking in my car windows at night is definitely a possibility. And I would say if you also live in a large urban area and that's something you might be concerned about, look into getting some kind of cover or something for it, because nothing screams I have valuable tactical things in my car like, this big old thing attached to the back of your car seat. If discretion and the ability to, as the great street poet and philosopher Chameleonaire once put it, ride dirty is something that is kind of more what you're looking for, our second brand might be much more your speed, and it's from the aptly named Grayman Tactical. Grayman Tactical's RMP, or Rigid Molly panel, as the name might suggest, immediately addresses some of the minor gripes with 511's Hex Grid that I have, as the RMP is intended to bear a lot more weight without flex or give, and can be set up to securely roll with a full-sized rifle on the back of your seat, if for whatever reason that's something you feel the need to do. Now, a bit of clarification here, we are city folk, and specifically city folk from one of the most populous counties in all of the United States. And that being said, there is literally zero circumstance in which we would ever recommend stowing a firearm in your vehicle for any length of time around here, as it's a great way for that shit to grow legs and disappear. But that being said, we also recognize that our circumstances are probably not the case for large swaths of more rural America. If you live and work on a large acreage ranch where you're not really expecting anyone to be around for miles and miles, or maybe you do overlanding, or you're doing some kind of backcountry hunting excursion, something like that, having the ability to safely and securely stash your rifle and know that someone can't just smash a window and grab it probably makes more sense than having it on the back of your seat while you run into a grocery store to fill up a shopping cart with Doritos or whatever. I hope you get the point. And again, secure is a very relative term here, as even the most secure or bomb-proof locks can and will be defeated by thieves if given enough time, and I guess if they're moto enough. So don't blame us if you do something stupid and get got because of it. All of that being said, I'm actually surprised at how cool this setup wound up being, even if I'm not maybe necessarily its core or target demographic. The basic setup and mounting procedure is similar to the 511 Hex Grid panels, but with some key differences. The Grayman setup utilizes webbing and Fastex buckles to secure the RMP to the back of your seat, and in my opinion this feels much more secure than just the webbing alone. And it's worth mentioning that these are some of the gnarliest Fastex buckles I've ever encountered, and they take a much larger amount of force exertion than you might expect to actually disengage them, which probably makes sense when you have a gun strapped in. The RMP also utilizes Grayman's unique machined mounting pieces to give each piece of kit you might mount to it much more secure of a method of staying put as compared to just normal molly webbing, although pouches can be woven directly to it in the event that the hardware is unavailable or unnecessary, and the RMP's polymer surface will readily accept most adhesive-backed Velcro strips if you feel like cutting some to size for those aforementioned Velcro-backed pouches. As for the rifle locking mechanism, there are a few cool things going on here as well. Straight out of the box, the SC6 lock comes with a 12-volt plug mechanism that goes right into your vehicle's cigarette charger. You've got an on-off toggle switch, the release mechanism itself, and then a small dial that controls exactly how much time you've got to release the locking ratchet after it detects a button press. The entire system took a few tries to nail down in a manner that felt natural to operate, probably exacerbated by the fact that the RMP was mounted directly behind me, and thus I needed to exit the vehicle to grab it and go. But once you get a feel for it, it's a pretty rad little system. And if you're handy with a soldering iron, the option exists to hardwire in a hidden momentary contact switch if you'd rather not mess with the cigarette lighter outlets. And as one final theft deterrent, you'll want to lock the entire platform down underneath your seat with the supplied cable lock to make sure that the RMP itself can't just be jacked straight out of the car without some fight involved. Now, obviously, this is sideways, and also obviously, vehicle combat is not really anything that's in my personal wheelhouse. So this was my first stab at setting stuff up, and once I got it out to the desert, I immediately identified a few things that needed to be changed. Namely, once you actually have mags in here, you don't really want them underneath a large floppy pouch that's going to get in the way if you needed to get to them for whatever reason. It's one of those things that hopefully you have some time to play with before you need to use it for whatever reason, and you can kind of figure out what works for you. If you're the type that needs to have actual ballistic kit ready to go, there are options to mount a tough hook directly to the RMP to provide a spot for your plate carrier to live. And this small unassuming bar gives you a spot to hang a ballistic helmet, so on, you probably get the idea. But they've even got mounting hardware that mates to the back of these G-code magazine pouches. And it's actually pretty impressive the amount of modularity that Grayman has managed to build into what's a pretty simplistic platform. And rather than needing to hunt down disparate pieces of kit to make all of this come together in a way that makes any kind of sense, it's cool to see a company that offers a variety of different packages that allow you to cater the product to your exact needs from the get-go. If, for example, you're grabbing an RMP and you kind of know that you want to throw some medical supplies on there, it's pretty cool that Grayman is just retailing these LTC fully stocked IFAKs that come with a ton of stuff. You know, obviously depending on what you're doing, it might be stuff you need, some stuff you don't, but personally, I will take anything that is more of a one-stop shop type of consumerism as compared to hunting down individual pieces of trauma gear from North American Rescue or whoever. Small, maybe incredibly nerdy side note, these locking shock loop things are one of the coolest pieces of small quality of life kit that I've seen in a really, really long time. And I'm actually kind of surprised that no one has done something quite like this before, but they're neat. Secure your gear better. And lastly, there's that whole discretion thing I was talking about. And should you need to stay low profile when you're doing your Meal Team 6 runs to Arby's at 0 dark 30, there is, wisely, a discreet black elastic cover that'll securely snug down over your whole operator minivan setup there. Champ. And the downsides, because of course there were going to be downsides. Grayman stuff is really, really pricey. And to be fair, it is made in the US. It's really beefy in construction. All of this stuff is pretty damn durable, at least from external appearances. And that's probably something that you want if you're gonna be strapping a rifle to the back of your car seat. However, this entire setup, or something approaching it, is gonna run you something to the tune of a couple $100s on their website retail. And obviously that'll fluctuate depending on what exactly you're throwing on there, but it is leagues away from 511's more entry-level price. So where does all of that leave us? These are obviously two entirely different products with different approaches to the same concept of equipping your vehicle for shitty situations. For the casual end user who might want to carry a bit of emergency supplies but not a whole lot else, the 511 Hex Grid panel does the job adequately, even if it's a tiny bit limited for much more beyond that. For folks who need a more rigorous or serious product, the ability to have a kit like a plate carrier, helmet, mags, and a blaster ready to go at a moment's notice while at least retaining some modicum of deterrent against sticky fingers, the Grayman RMP is absolutely going to be the way to go if your wallet can handle the hit. Alright guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, as I will continue to make up and forget car names in future videos. My name is John with Pew Pew Tactical. We've got shirts below. Chevy Gandalf. With what I do, I kind of tend to enjoy being covert.